the stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw, and that would be your Chickasaw native, your Chickasaw Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And we got history's greatest historian, wrestling history's greatest historian. He may be history's greatest historian. He don't know, but he is a wrestling Hall of Fame historian. He is our friend, Mr. Tony Richards, and we are on the greatest topic of all time. God bless Texas.
George Tragus Luthez Hall of Fame.
That is right. Part 8 of our story and our segments on Texas wrestling history.
Wow.
Here we go.
Man, that's fantastic. Last time we were talking, we were getting up to the 1940s. And our last show, which I hope you guys
About the time I was born.
That's right, the 1840s.
1940s, John. Come on.
We've covered the carnival era. We've covered the athletic shows. We've covered the early days of wrestling in Texas when it became a weekly attraction and found homes in towns. And those towns are starting to grow up now. Last time we talked about tag teams throughout.
More strange people moving to Texas. That's really that saying is so weird.
Lots
all
of
these
strange
people.
That's right, because Texas people are normal, great people.
In the 1920s, handicap matches were very common. They would put one wrestler against two wrestlers. That was an old at-show gimmick that they would do. We talked about last time the first recorded team match. I won't say tag team. I got a note from somebody.
Relay match, Tony. Relay match.
Yeah, that's right. Talking about it. So it was October 2nd, 1936. Our hero, Milo Steinborn, and our other hero, Whisker Savage, against Tiger Darla and Fazul Muhammad, all four guys in the ring at the same time. That led to, when something's successful in the wrestling business, even back in these early days, word spread. So team matches started being held in Georgia, Missouri, Ohio, all in 1938. Al Haft put on the first team match in Columbus, Ohio, September 1938. The finish was both wrestlers on one side were pinned using the count of 5. So they used a 5 count in the team match. It's unclear.
Wow. Instead of a 3 count, they used a 5 count. I guess it gave the guy more time to break away from his opponent and come over and make the save.
It's unclear when they started going to 2 contestants at a time in the ring and 2 outside the ring holding a tag rope. But they used towels in Washington State as late as 1949. Some newspaper accounts suggest tag team wrestling was in place by at least 1939. The earliest documented brother teams started appearing in 1938.
What are the Brisco brothers, John?
Brisco brothers didn't come along to the 1960s.
They've been around for a while.
By the way, here's a picture of my favorite character at that time, old Whisker Savage there. He's a good-looking guy with a bunch of whiskers on him. And he got a great smile on him. No wonder he was so popular with the fans.
From the backwoods of Kentucky.
Backwoods of Kentucky, right in your backyard there.
A nickname was Daniel Boone, and his other nickname was Whiskers. And
Right.
Paul Bosch had a picture of him in his office until the day he cleaned out his office. He always claimed that Whisker Savage is the one guy that kept Houston wrestling, always kept it alive, and kept it going during the Great Depression for sure. The brother teams, Roy and Herb Welch in Tennessee, starting in 1938.
Who invented wrestling.
RASSLI.
Guys invented wrestling.
John Bradshaw Layfield said so.
Exactly. Mr. Brisco said it too.
1938, Pete and Ivan Manigoff in Texas. In 1939, there was a match with Sid Marcus and Joe Gunther facing Jack Steele and Charlie Keene in New Orleans. Kansas City had its first team match in 1939. The women got involved in 1939. December 28th, Mildred Burke and Princess Rose Whitecloud defeated Wilma Gordon and Gladys Gillum in Columbus, Ohio. The first
now, my friend Mae Young had a nickname for Gladys.
Gillum.
Gillum. I love that nickname. Gillum.
Yeah. The first team match in Atlanta was May 1940 with Cowboy Latral and Herb Freeman beating Hans Schnabel and Angelo Sistoldi. They also called them, Jerry referenced this, relay matches as partners got relayed in and out of the ring. Tag team wrestling hit the West Coast in 1940 with Vic Christie and Jules Strongbow. Jules Strongbow ended up being the matchmaker in Los Angeles for the entirety of his career. The Texas tag team titles were first introduced in 1944, about the same time that the Southern tag team titles were introduced by the Welches in Tennessee and Kentucky. Tag team wrestling first came to Madison Square Garden in 1953. There was no wrestling in Madison Square Garden from 1938 to 1949. On January 5th, 1953, Steve and Gene Stanley took on Rudy Kay and Al Williams. Gene Stanley was always Jerry Oates' favorite wrestler. He said he was under 10 years old. I don't know how old he was, 7 or 8 years old. And he saw Gene Stanley in the Municipal Auditorium in Columbus, Georgia, and said, that's what I want to be, is a wrestler.
Wow. Now, Rudy, what was Rudy?
Rudy Kay.
Rudy Kay. Was he one of the Burks or was that?
Cormier brothers.
Cormier brothers.
Yeah, Leo Burke was one of the Cormier brothers' wrestling name. They used different wrestling. One of them was the Beast.
There was a Rudy Kay wrestling during my time too.
Yes. I wouldn't it have been the same guy?
I don't think it would have, because he was a younger guy, I think, at the time.
I thought some of those guys, Cormiers, were wrestling for Crockett like in the 50s.
Well, I was there in the 60s or 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
So let's talk about the 1940s. We're moving into the decade of the 40s. Houston wrestling, the decade that built Texas' premier wrestling territory. The 1940s was a real transformational decade for Houston wrestling. A lot of wrestling suffered greatly during the Great Depression and during World War II, but the one place that really did well was Houston.
Hey, Tony, real quick, it took me a while to look it up. Is that your guy, Mr. Brisco?
Yeah, it's Rudy Kay.
Yeah, that's Rudy Kay. That's the Rudy Kay I knew, so it had to be him. Wow.
That's a Cormier brother.
He must have been 60 years old when he was wrestling there.
What he looked like when you knew him? Was he still in shape?
About like that. I mean, he was in shape. He was in
really?
Shape guy. Yeah.
So he was a fairly old guy, especially for back then in wrestling, and good shape.
Yeah, there were four of those Cormier brothers, and they stretched out. I think Rudy was the oldest, and then Leo Burke was one, and then 2 others.
They wrestled the Burks, Rudy Kay. They were several different names, the Cormiers.
They were involved in the wrestling promotion up in Nova Scotia.
Right. Yeah, that's the same one, Joe.
Morris Siegel had laid the foundation for what would become one of the most influential territories in Texas. Many innovations that were credited later on in the industry to Paul Bosch actually started with Morris Siegel. He was quite a businessman. He wasn't really so much knowledgeable about wrestling itself, but he was very knowledgeable about operations and business and how to run a successful business. Houston, by the 1940s, is one of the premier wrestling cities. Friday night wrestling had become a weekly tradition. It was regularly attracting the biggest stars in wrestling in America, developed a reputation for excellent officiating and well-booked events. Doc Sarpolis is the booker and the matchmaker for Houston, and they own the Texas Wrestling Agency that controls a whole lot of the talent that goes in and out of Texas. Houston City Auditorium is the building that they wrestled in. It was centrally located, easily accessible, and it was large enough to draw large crowds for championship matches. Later on, in 1945, they would move over to the Sam Houston Coliseum for larger events and larger crowds with a lot bigger seating capacity. Later on in the history of Houston wrestling, of course, that would be the regular Friday night building. But like a lot of wrestling territories in the South, they had the smaller weekly building, and then once a month, a lot like Eddie Graham did in Florida, where on Tuesday night he had the Homer Hesterly, and then they'd move over to across the bay, right, Jerry, to the
Bayfront Center.
Bayfront Center, yeah, in St. Petersburg.
Or down the road, I-4 for the Lakeland Civic Center, which was a larger building too.
Yeah, you bet. World War II Unlike many entertainment businesses, Houston wrestling really flourished during World War II. Their booming defense industries, which were providing weapons for the war, brought thousands of workers into the city. One of the area's major forms of weekly entertainment was the wrestling matches, and Siegel became heavily involved in patriotic efforts. They did war bond drives, military appreciation cards and events, charity programs to benefit the war effort in Europe and Japan. One famous event combined professional wrestling with the Houston Symphony Orchestra as part of a war bond promotion and drive. Reportedly, according to Paul Bosch's book, I read in there, he said they sold millions of dollars in war bonds during the World War II years.
That's what really endeared Houston wrestling to the community, was their involvement in community activities like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Very strongly tied in, and that was something.
And
that
it wasn't Bruce Pritchard. Bruce Pritchard probably gave Paul the idea when he was
Bruce invented World War II.
Yeah,
was that what happened?
He invented war bonds too, John.
That's right.
He booked the Nazis, huh?
He did. Yeah, he thought they'd be good bad guys.
Yeah.
So here's the premier stars you got in the 40s in Houston. You got Wild Bill Longson. You got Buddy Rogers, who was very, very early on in his career. Dave Levin, Bobby Manigoff, Dean Detton, who we'll find out more about here in a second, Hans Schnabel, Gorilla Macias, Lou Plummer, a long forgotten name, but a big name in the 30s and the 40s.
Big name.
Of course, Don Leo Jonathan's brother Jonathan, was a huge first-generation star. The Dusick Riot Squad. As a matter of fact, later on in the early 70s, the Dusick brothers had been so big in Houston that when the Three Funks would be booked in Houston, they would call them the Funk Riot Squad after the Dusick brothers. That was only in Houston were they ever known as that. That was also big for women's wrestling. Some of the biggest stars, Mildred Burke, Mae Young, June Byers, they were all big Houston stars back in the 1940s. The Texas Heavyweight Championship was, of course, brought into existence by Doc Sarpolis. It was a huge championship, became nationally known. Bobby Manigoff, Buddy Rogers, Ted Cog. We're going to talk about two huge Texas champions coming up on the show here in just a little bit, but they were all.
Bobby Manigoff, Tony, why do you think he's kind of a forgotten name in the history too? And he was such an important player at our early days.
He held the Montreal version of the World Heavyweight Championship. Right. He was also booked out of St. Louis. He was a huge star at the Kiel Auditorium. He's just one of those guys that, a lot of wrestlers who the majority of their career are in the 40s and the 50s, they are just not, time erodes memory on guys like that.
Right.
That's your Manigoff right there, right?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah. Very young guy there. Bobby Manigoff. Paul Bosch comes into Houston wrestling in the 1940s. After he served in World War II, Bosch wrestled extensively in Houston. He also went up to wrestle in Portland and in Washington State.
Let's talk about Bosch. I mean, we don't know he's a war hero, but what was Paul Bosch? I mean, what was he?
Well, he was a pretty good old. What's that now?
Was he an accomplished athlete besides wrestling?
He was athletic, and I couldn't tell you exactly about his athletic background, but he wrestled while he was in the military service, and he was considered to be a shooter in his day.
Was he?
Yeah. 1947, he has the bad automobile accident that ended his in-ring wrestling career. And Morris Siegel saw that he was a go-getter as a young man, and he hired him to work behind the scenes, first as a radio announcer, and then brought him in as assistant promoter. And
reading your notes, Morris put together one hell of a team there. I mean, it's kind of like you see coaches do. He put the Bosch in, he put the Sarpolis in.
That's Paul Bosch.
That's Paul Bosch, yeah.
Yeah, that's a real early picture of Paul, too, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
because he's not beefy, because he got real beefy there.
Yeah, Morris Siegel was Jerry. He was a very, very good businessman.
Yeah, he
And
just put together a team that seemed like whatever assets he saw in a guy, he utilized those assets from a guy and really gave a lot of guys office opportunities.
he reminds me of Barnett and Vince McMahon Jr.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, those two, Barnett and McMahon Jr., a guy who really, really knows how to organize a business and make the business run, and then use somebody else who knows, the wrestling part and the accounting part, and
Right.
bring in people that were specialists in their part of the business.
Yeah.
During the 1940s, here's some of the things that really came into existence in Houston. They really established the weekly Friday night cards. They championed the Texas heavyweight title events. They did regular tag team wrestling. They did regular battle royals and elimination matches. They were really starting to develop more long-time storylines through guys to be booked there over, a 3 to 4 month period. They were very careful. They carefully protected the title, and they made sure that it continued to mean something. And they built their local guys, and then they brought in their touring national stars to mix in with them. And it really was kind of the formula that would later be used by Sam Mushnick in St. Louis for,
Right.
That town. And then also Fred Kohler in Chicago would use this formula, and some other promoters where they would really emphasize these things in their town.
It's really unique, that a single town, gets lumped in as a territory, like the St. Louis territory. When it was just St. Louis, the Houston territory. When it was, later on in our lifetime, it was just Houston. But these territories get lumped into Houston. That just shows you the extent of the popularity of the promotion.
Did Bosch never try running other towns?
Yeah, he did. Houston had a territory. I don't know. We're not quite to the point where he drops off, and really in 1966 they don't even control the booking anymore. After Morris Siegel passes away in 1966, they become part of Fritz's territory, and they become Fritz's Friday night town from the Dallas office, and that continues to around 1978. And then they break away. They partner with Joe Blanchard for a little while. Then he partners up with Bill Watts, and then Watts sold his territory, sold his promotion to Crockett, and didn't tell Paul Bosch.
Yeah.
And then Bosch found out that he was selling it, and he was terribly offended.
That's where all the heat, John, that Bruce gets on Watts, right, from that.
And that sort of messed up the deal there with Crockett in Houston. Because Watts forgot to tell, whether he meant to not tell him or forgot to tell him.
Forgot, yeah. Bill don't forget anything.
but Bosch didn't know. That was the bottom line.
So Bill sold his town?
Yeah, well, he sold his promotion, and Bosch was, letting Mid-South Wrestling run his town and book the talent and all that, and just, they would locally promote the shows, but it was Bill Watts' town. And so when he sold the promotion, the town went with it. And Bosch didn't know about it, and that led to then discussion with McMahon. So then Bosch went over and switched sides, and then gave the town to McMahon, and then that didn't go well. Paul claimed that Vince was not honest and upfront in his dealings, and so it was a nasty, terrible end to a legendary city. I mean, it never really drew that well after all of that took place, all that switching around.
It took a while, but it eventually came back.
Oh, sure, yeah. Today it would draw great, but back in the territory.
Part of part of the thing that really upset me when I was doing the local promotion for them. I was working my way around that whole Gulf Coast, and I wanted Houston so bad because of its history and its background and everything. And I talked to Basil DeVito, and Basil said, "Yeah, you can have it." And then he said, "But I got to clear it with Barnett first, because Barnett was kind of Vince's liaison on who got what talent and everything." So then Basil called me. "You got to talk to Jim." So I called Jim, and he said, "Gerald, we want a local guy to do it." And that's when I found out I wasn't getting Houston to kind of really.
Oh man.
Well, I would have had the entire Gulf Coast doing local promotions.
And what happened? Why did Jim not do it?
He wanted somebody more local, represent the community. Where I was in Florida, and they wanted somebody local, which the way it was presented. Jim had a way of presenting things that make you convinced that you were wrong and he was right, but they needed a local voice there because that's what Houston was used to throughout its history. With local guys.
It would be a good show for us to do sometime, but we should do a show on towns that get killed.
Yeah.
Because back in the territory days, if a town got killed off, it was very, very hard. And most times it never recovered.
Never came back fully, yeah.
And that's kind of what happened to
Knoxville.
That happened to Atlanta. It happened to Atlanta.
Well, Knoxville ended up coming back after Fuller came back around 85, 86, after the Fullers had invented wrestling.
Yeah. But it wasn't coming back till Ron came back.
Correct. That whole mess that they had with the video and all that stuff killed it.
Jerry Jarrett never drew in Nashville the way Nick Goulas did when that went away. They never could get Chattanooga back again. They never could get Birmingham quite back the way it was before. No. Ron did bring it back somewhat. Houston is a great example. There's just a lot of situations.
Amarillo's another one. I mean,
when Georgia Championship Wrestling went away and Vince came in, Crockett's never drew in Atlanta like Georgia Championship Wrestling did.
All those local towns like Macon and Columbus and
Augusta.
None of those could draw like they did with Georgia.
Crockett could never draw a crowd in Columbus, Georgia.
Even if you want to go farther, I mean, in the Carolinas, the Charleston, the Columbia, the Raleigh,
Greensboro.
It took a while for those towns even to come back. They were strong major towns. But anyway, back to Texas.
Dallas. 1940s was a great decade in the history of Dallas wrestling. Much due to the matchmaker Carl Sarpolis and the popularity of the Dallas Sportatorium. Ed McLemore took control of the promotion from Burt Willoughby in 1940. And he started out as the concession stand manager. I read an interesting article. There was a book called Towering Texans. And
what a great book.
It was. I really enjoyed reading it, but it was sports people from Texas. And it was written back in the 1950s.
A short book,
well, it was quite a volume, Jerry. But it had a great story in there about Ed McLemore, and it's just a wonderful story of a guy who basically starts at the bottom and works his way all the way to the top, to the time where he takes over ownership of the Sportatorium, and he was the popcorn and hot dog guy. And he was another one who really understood the business of wrestling, or understood business, but left the wrestling part and the storylines and the talent management and all that up to Sarpolis. And in the 1940s, the Sportatorium started hosting their weekly cards on Tuesday nights. They drew fans from throughout North Texas. It became the permanent home of Dallas wrestling, one of the most busiest wrestling venues in the country. And not only that, Ed McLemore started hosting the Big D Dallas Jamboree, which was the big radio show being done out of the Sportatorium, and hosting people like Hank Williams and Ferlin Husky and Ernest Tubb and the Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys and all these other big country music acts. It became, there he is, Ed McLemore.
Big Ed.
It became really the Grand Ole Opry of Texas, and was a fantastic draw for crowds and for the radio. Sarpolis was the matchmaker. He recruited talent all across North America. I just wrote a big piece on the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel about the life and career of Fritz von Erich. And Fritz von Erich was living in Corpus Christi. He had been a big SMU star, and we'll talk about him more.
Was Fritz originally from Texas?
He was. He was from Denton, Texas, and was a SMU football star, played a little bit of pro football, It didn't work out in the pros, and he had just been released, and was running a fish and bait shop in Corpus Christi. And Doc Sarpolis calls him up one day and says, "Hey, I think with your football reputation here in Dallas at SMU, you might be able to draw some money in wrestling." And he got hooked. Sarpolis, who was good friends with Pfeffer, got Fritz hooked up, and the Fritz von Erich
So
story.
that was Fritz beginning just out of a random phone call, basically.
Yep, it really was.
Through newspaper clippings or Sarpolis had seen newspaper clippings.
Sarpolis called him up in Corpus, where he and Doris were living, and they were running this bait shop. And he said, "Why don't you come up here and work out with my friend?" And he didn't tell him who his friend was, but he gets there to the Sportatorium, and his friend is Ed Strangler Lewis.
Wow.
And so Strangler works out with Fritz. He goes, "I think we can make this kid a star." And then they hooked him up with Pfeffer, who sent him out to Pittsburgh. And then he went to Canada, and then he was in the upper East Coast up there.
Fritz was with Jack Pfeffer then.
Originally, yes.
Is that where he came up with the faux German name?
Yep. We came up with the Von Erich, and then ended up teaming him with Waldo. And the Von Erich, which the German heel tag teams were huge back there in the 50s and 60s.
That's what Pfeffer was famous for, folks, was renaming these guys, and just really funky type name.
Bummy Rogers.
G.G. Rogers.
Yeah.
What was Brazil? Hobo Brazil?
Hobo Brazil.
Yeah, Hobo
Brazil. When we get to the 60s in Amarillo, we got, big time. That the first Texas death match was Dory Funk Sr. and Fritz Von Erich in Lubbock, Texas. And so we got a lot to talk about with Fritz. But Sarpolis was that kind of guy, was my point. He was very good at locating talent. He was very good at identifying talent, grooming talent, and making stars. And he learned all that from being associated with Pfeffer. And he did a good job of booking local guys, building them up, and mixing them with national touring stars that would come in. He was very good with talent exchanges with other promoters around the country. Anybody studying Texas wrestling history, it's you can't separate Ed McLemore, Morris Siegel, and Doc Sarpolis. I mean, they ran Texas wrestling pretty much. Dallas. Billy Edwards, Wild Bill Longson also was a draw there. Gorgeous George was a draw. Ruffy Silverstein. One of the biggest stars in Dallas was Blackie Guzman. Leo the Lion Newman from Missouri was a big draw. Wild Red Berry. And then our big stars toward the end of the 40s, Ray Gunkel, Buddy Rogers, Vern Gagne, they were all huge as the television was coming in Dallas. Blackie Guzman was a very dominant Texas heavyweight champion.
And Blackie was one of those guys could go heel or babyface for him too, right?
That's right. As I mentioned, Dallas, it was a Tuesday night town. And World War II, also, they felt the effects of World War II. Of course, there was a talent shortage. A lot of wrestlers were in military service. There were transportation restrictions, gasoline rationing. But despite all these obstacles, much like when we covered the wrestling in Tennessee, they were able to overcome the obstacles and successfully mix returning veterans with new stars. Dallas worked very close with Houston because Sarpolis owned a third of the Texas Wrestling Agency with Morris Siegel. Dallas, though, was really situating itself where it was really going to be a television era promotion. And, of course, we are all familiar with what it was television-wise in the world-class years. I mean, all of the seeds of the great television production coming out of Dallas were sown all the way back here in the 1940s. They had a strong business mind in Ed McLemore. They had an outstanding booking with Doc Sarpolis. They had a great building in the Dallas Sportatorium. They had a great cooperation with Houston and some other Texas promoters in the smaller towns. They had a weekly Tuesday night that built fan loyalty. They had a steady stream because of Sarpolis with national stars. They also had their share of Texas heavyweight title matches. It was just a fantastic seeding ground to build a great wrestling city in Dallas that is going to explode in the 1950s. I mean, you're going to have three big television markets in the 1950s. You're going to have Chicago, Los Angeles, and Dallas. Those are going to be your big media centers. Let's talk about the biggest draws in Texas during the 1940s. This guy's actually, I saw some data that some historians had collected on biggest draws of all time. And number 4 biggest, you're never going to pass Jim Londos. You know, he was number 1 on the list. Number 4 on the list, though, is Wild Bill Longson. And Wild
John,
Bill,
did you ever meet him in San Luis?
No, never met him. No.
What a character. What a gentleman, too. What a good guy.
Really? Did you work with him, Jerry?
No, I never worked with him. I worked with him as an office guy. He was Sam's right-hand man. He gave the finishes up in St. Louis when I was starting out.
Tell me if I'm right about this, Jerry, but the way I see photos of Wild Bill, he's very comparable to John.
Very much so. I mean, that's there's an identity there with John.
I mean,
about the same size, you know. 6'4",
tall,
6'5".
bulky. Yeah, look at him, man. Look at him. And
Wild
Bill.
I mean, even in his later years, he was a stud-looking guy. You know, a guy that you enjoyed going in his office and sitting down and just listen to his knowledge and listen to him talk.
And how tall was he, Jerry?
He's probably 6'5", somewhere.
Really? He was that big?
Yeah,
he's a big guy.
Well, he's credited with inventing the pile driver.
Yeah.
So if you Google Wild Bill Longson and pile
there's
driver,
a picture of him here. I'll show you.
Demonstrating it.
Yeah, but Bill was very articulate guy. I like John,
there he is, right there.
There he is, right there.
And he's got his knees bent.
Yeah, see how tall he is there, Don. You could tell
he was a big dude that could work. Yeah. Very agile
and move for a big guy. You know,
right.
Yeah. He was a plate. I mean, he was one of those guys that John, you go into a building and you see one of these old timers. He's one of those guys that automatically people just were drawn to because of it.
And his gimmick was just he was a tough dude.
Yeah, he was just big old wild guy. Wild Bill Longson.
He was not. He didn't have a gimmick per se. He was just a big old tough guy.
Yeah. He wasn't a cowboy or anything like that. He was just one of these just regular
straight ahead
guys,
tough
straight
dude.
ahead athlete, you know, an athletic guy.
National Wrestling Association world champion 3 times in the 1940s. His title reigns gave every promoter who booked him a main event attraction.
He was one of my all-time favorite guys. He really was.
I mean, he wrestled in Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, San Antonio. He wrestled in all the major cities, and being booked out of St. Louis with Tom Pax.
I'm surprised it was never one of those Al Half or the Chicago big stars like that.
I mean, he was a guy that was known for powerful body slams, big forearm smashes, submissions, pile drivers. His matches were longer than world title matches had been, because a lot of the football guys are wrestling maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Wild Bill would go hour draws. He was a big, agile dude.
And you say he was named by that one list the 4th best draw of all time.
All time, yeah.
Wow. Really?
He was. Mm-hmm. And when you think about his title reigns in the 40s during World War II, that's something.
That's something.
Yeah. I mean, because everything was a shortage and money wasn't plentiful, but he still drew crowds. Wow. I mean, they still drew crowds in the Kiel Auditorium, you know, and then here in Dallas and Houston and these places, and during a very difficult economic time.
Where was Wild Bill originally from? Was he from Missouri?
Oh, man, good question. Wild Bill Longson.
John, you got it?
Born in Salt Lake, Utah.
Oh, wow.
That means he's from there.
A lot of those big guys come from Utah.
I was just thinking I would have loved to have seen him and Brother Jonathan. Yeah. Don Leo Jonathan's dad, who was also from Utah. They were Mormons. Would have been a big, powerful match, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Also, we mentioned his name already. Blackie Guzman was one of Texas' biggest stars, one of most popular wrestlers to compete in Texas during the 40s. He was, of course, from Mexico, and he had big Hispanic fan drawing ability, a combination of athleticism, toughness, and charisma. Made him one of Ed McLemore's most dependable attraction. He held the Texas Heavyweight Championship multiple times during the 1940s. His championship victories helped establish the Texas title as one of the premier regional championships. And that's something to remember, too. There he is. Black Guzman.
A good-looking Hispanic guy. Nice behind there.
The Texas Heavyweight Championship is going to be next to the world title. I mean, it's next in importance at this particular time. And the Texas Championship would be the premier title until around 1970 when the Missouri title.
It was a stepping stone. That's what I was going to say. Bring in was the Missouri title. That kind of preceded the Missouri title as the most prestigious belt.
Yeah, usually the guys who were going to be promoted nationally won the Texas title. You had Buddy Rogers, Lou Thez, you had Ray Gunkel, you had Vern Gagne. They all, before they went on to national prominence, held the Texas title first.
You want to find it interesting, just being me. I mean, from all these lists of names that we've been bringing up and will bring up, the lack of Native American stars that hit Texas. I guess the Texans, like they went back to that show. They just didn't want to. They were too good athletes to be in there.
Possible.
So they went
there are some brothers that come along and changes that. But another name I wanted to bring up is one of the four big draws in Texas was Ray Gunkel. He came in during the latter part of the 40s. And, of course, during our Jim Bornett series, we covered a lot about Ray Gunkel. He was married to Ann Gunkel. He was a partner in the Georgia Territory with Buddy Fuller.
He was a big football and wrestling star at Purdue University, too, right?
He was. And they put him with Jack Dempsey in Texas. Jack Dempsey was his manager and second for his matches. And he ended up having a heart attack after a match with Ox Baker in Savannah, Georgia, which kicked off the big promotional war in Georgia. There he is.
Yeah, there's Ray. Average-looking guy, really. I mean, it wasn't a big muscle-bound guy or a big, huge guy. It was just a barely above average-looking guy.
And of the people I've talked to, not easy to get along with. Ray.
Right. Yeah, he wasn't. That's what
I mean, Buddy Fuller, from all accounts that I've heard of, was just a really nice, charismatic fella, and they could not get along. So that tells you something about Ray, I think. He by the end of the 40s, Gunkel had become one of the leading contenders for the Texas title and helped bring in the new generation of stars that would dominate the 50s. Unlike a lot of large heavyweights, Gunkel he had a real amateur style in the pro rings. He was very fast.
Big Ten wrestling champion.
He was Big Ten wrestling champion. He was very speedy, worked fast. He was very conditioned. He was very smooth from a technical execution standpoint, and he really got over with fans because he was in those days called a very scientific wrestler. And then,
back in those days, baby faces were called scientific wrestlers.
Yeah, and rule breakers were the heels.
And rule breakers were the heels, yeah.
The fourth guy would
John was a rule breaker, and I was a scientific wrestler.
The fourth guy would be Irish Danny.
We just called the good guys prima donnas.
There you go.
Yeah.
The fourth guy would be Irish Danny McShane, the Irish hooligan. Very few wrestlers generated stronger emotions in Texas than Danny McShane. Danny McShane, if you watch a lot of the later video in Houston wrestling, he's the referee for a lot of matches.
Right, yeah.
But he got into Texas in the early 40s. He was already one of the bigger attractions in other parts of the country. He wrestled throughout Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, and in Oklahoma. He was there he is.
He wasn't a huge guy either.
He wasn't. He had the pencil thin mustache there.
Yeah.
He he wrestled a lot of feuds with Wild Bill, Blackie Guzman, Billy Edwards, Wild Red Berry. Orville Brown was one of his big opponents.
Billy Edwards, yeah, that's that's a name that we keep bringing up, and I don't really know a lot of Billy Edwards' background.
Billy Edwards. Billy Edwards, wrestler. Well, he was a catch as catch can wrestler, and let's see, showcase bouts in the United States. He kind of had a, well, that's a boxer there.
These guys have the worst poses. Look at this.
Yeah,
Look how horrible that pose looks.
He's got a sway back there.
Yeah, that is a horrible pose.
I mean, that's some tough shooter guy posed like a freaking supermodel.
Yeah. So anyway, let's try to move on now.
Yeah, we'll come back to Billy Edwards, but McShane's matches were brawls. I mean, he was a brawler. A lot of
Irish hooligan, yeah. So
yeah. He was one of the catalysts to cause Doc Sarpolis to think of blading, because he had such wild matches and took so many hard chair shots. He and Wild Bull Curry, that Sarpolis came up with the concept of using a blade to get juice instead of them hitting each other over the head with chairs every night. And Sarpolis got to thinking that the audience was starting to look at wrestling and not sure about it, and he thought, well, if we do real blood and we do it, but we got to do it with a way that doesn't kill the guys every night with these chair shots. So he came up with blading, which would be used in wrestling, or still used today.
It's like the first guy that ate an egg. Like, I won't eat the next thing out of that chicken's butt. It just make a lot of sense to you. The first guy to blade had to be like, wait a minute, you want me to do what?
Yeah. Well, I would have been McShane or Wild Bull, or one of those guys would have been the first guy to take a shaved off blade and put it in his tape or something, or put it in his wristband. I'm not sure how they did it back in those days, but
on their finger.
Yeah, a lot of guys did do that, tape it to their finger, which I always thought.
All the early guys had to tape their fingers, whether they were doing blades or not. They taped their finger, at the end of the finger.
To me, I'm sitting there thinking, gee, how do you not hack the other guy or yourself with that tape there? I mean,
just a tie up, boom.
I mean, I know you didn't do a lot of that, no. Jerry. I mean, how's that work? I mean, how do you keep it from?
I hated guys that would put it on their finger. I hated it. I was always nervous I was going to get cut to shreds by these guys. I never did.
I mean, did you put the piece of tape over it and take it off when it was?
Oh yeah. You wrapped a piece of tape over it, and you just peel that tape. You roll the tape back like that.
But then it's exposed for the rest.
Then you could roll it back over it.
Hey, you flip it off and flip it back on.
Okay.
They called it a lid, and you'd have a tape that you'd bend over, and so it wouldn't stick to the blade. You have the tape. You know what I'm saying, with the double tape. Where you'd have the smooth side. Then you'd have that tape over then you have the tape on top of that would be the lid. Then you just pull that back, and then you got your gimmick.
Wow.
I did the same thing, but I never kept it anywhere on my wrist, so I knew exactly where it was.
Well, I learned something today.
And then a lot of people kept it right on the top of their trunks too, right where you.
Yeah, which I was scared to do. I never wanted to do that. A lot of guys would end up with their hands, like that, and the referee would, come by and just drop it in there, And that's how the referee would drop it, but. I didn't want anybody. I didn't want anybody touching my blade. I didn't want anybody making my blade. I didn't want anybody nothing.
Especially Gary Hart.
No shit. Yes. Yeah.
Making
after that match with Eddie, when he bled so much, I came in there with a steak knife, and I put a little tape around it. I go, Eddie, I found your blade.
Oh, really? Well, speaking of that,
they called it business blades.
Business blade, yeah.
speaking of that, making his debut, working for EMLL in Mexico and drawing huge crowds. In the 1940s, making his debut in Texas is Salvador Guerrero Quesada, who we know as Gory Guerrero.
And he got his name Gory from the blood, right?
Yeah, being exceptional, being in exceeding exceptional blood matches. He created the famous Gory Special move, which would later be called the Camel Clutch. He influenced generations of wrestlers at the time throughout Texas and Mexico. Very few wrestlers of the 1940s had greater long-term influence on wrestling than Gory Guerrero, mainly generational. There he is wearing the World Welterweight title. That's the NWA World Welterweight, I think.
He named Mondo after a riot, his son Mondo.
Really?
Yeah. There was an autograph. His son was born. He had a riot in Mexico City, or at least that's when the write-up was in the paper. And Mondo was some type of Spanish term that led into what he's talking about. So that's why he named his son Mondo.
Wow. I'm fascinated with the Guerrero family. I'd like to learn a whole lot more about them. I got in contact with Hector, and we're supposed to be talking soon. I hope we get to do that.
Hector's a very bright guy. You'll love.
You'll like Hector's a good dude. He was a really good worker.
Oh yeah. God, oh my gosh.
Hector could go.
To be as thin as he was really good. They put him in that spaceman outfit, or what? Dusty put him in that spaceman outfit or whatever that they were trying to do there for a while.
This guy had two of the worst gimmicks in the world.
Oh my God! Yeah,
had an egg and still could work.
That's right. People don't know that chicken can work.
That willingness to engage in brutally physical contests earned him the nickname Gory, which was a reference to the blood-soaked matches that became one of his trademarks. In 1945, the picture that John just showed, he captured the Mexican National Welterweight Championship before moving into the middleweight ranks, where he won the Mexican National Middleweight Championship. These victories demonstrated his remarkable versatility. He excelled against both lighter technicians and larger, more physical wrestlers. Perhaps nothing defined Gory Guerrero's career in the 1940s than his legendary rivalry with Canario Galindo. Their matches helped redefine what wrestling audiences expected from major feuds. Instead of simple exhibitions of holds and throws, Guerrero and Galindo fought with remarkable intensity. Their matches became famous for dramatic bloodshed, emotional storytelling, and violent exchanges that influenced generations of wrestlers and promoters throughout Mexico and Texas. Possibly the biggest tag team, for sure the biggest tag team in Mexico, and one of the most famous tag teams worldwide was the Atomic Pair. And that was Gory Guerrero and El Santo. Their partnership worked because they complemented each other. Gory Guerrero was great at technical wrestling, and El Santo was great at explosive offense, charisma, and very large crowd appeal. He's just a cultural hero and beloved in Mexico.
One of the first masked guys, right, Santo?
Yeah. The Atomic Pair quickly became one of the biggest attractions in Mexico. They were promoted as virtually unbeatable. There they are.
There they are, yeah.
The Atomic Pair. There they are. Gory and El Santo. They headlined countless major events throughout the remainder of the decade. Their reputation became so legendary that later generations, including Eddie and El Hijo del Santo, would revive the famous name decades later. During the 40s, Guerrero was regarded as one of wrestling's greatest technicians. In Texas, he mostly wrestled in Houston and Dallas, but he was a big star in the West Texas territory out of the Amarillo office, and would eventually be the local promoter in El Paso and across the border in the Juarez. Gory Guerrero, quite a story.
Yeah, he's with Gory Sr. over something one time. They got it worked out, but it's over some towns, right?
Over El Paso. I think what happened, and I want to ask Hector about this, but Gory wanted to break away from the Amarillo office and become an NWA member and have his own office. And part of that is because of what Mike London had done that with Albuquerque.
Albuquerque.
And Gory wanted to control his own booking and his own guys. And there had been a situation in 1974 where Jack had come in there with the world title and got paid hardly anything. It just wasn't drawing, and Gory blamed the fact that the town wasn't being booked right, and he wanted to take over the booking from Amarillo and book his own town. And then he wanted to become an NWA member, and that they ended up working it out. But I've got all the letters that were written back and forth between Gory and the Funks and Sam Muchnick on that.
Ask Hector about going with his dad to bail Gorgeous George out of jail in Juarez.
That sounds like a good story.
It's a great story. He told us the story on her. It's an awesome story. So they're looking for Buddy Colt, and Gorgeous George, the third, doesn't realize they're looking for Buddy Colt. So the cops ask him what his name is. He tells them he's Buddy Colt. And so they're looking for Buddy Colt. So they arrest him. And Buddy Colt has a rat, goes back to El Paso with the rat, leaves him in jail. And Gory gets up in the morning like at 5 a.m. and gets Hector to say, come on, we got to bail somebody out of jail. And Hector goes down with his dad, and there's Gorgeous George in a Mexican jail.
Oh, my gosh.
But because they think he's Buddy Colt.
That Amarillo territory, going from Albuquerque on a Sunday night show in Albuquerque and driving all night to get to El Paso.
I made that trip.
And that's a long trip. 444 miles from Abilene, Texas. There's a sign there. I used to see it all the time.
Long trip.
And never really go to bed. Just keep on driving to Juarez.
Just keep on driving now.
And then go to the show.
Tag out on driving.
I cannot imagine. I mean, there's one story, and I think it's in Dory Funk Jr.'s book that Don Fargo was telling that is out of this world about the night they went over. But that one, I can't imagine the Sunday night, Monday night stories that took place there. Let's go to Amarillo, and West Texas is going to come back to life. Last time we left our heroes, Dutch Mantell died in 1941, and so did wrestling.
Not the mustache Dutch Mantell.
The original Dutch Mantell.
Yeah.
That's don't spread any rumors.
Albert Grandier, he passed away.
Clickbait, Dutch Mantell died.
Clickbait, that's right. Dutch Mantell died.
Thank you, Dutch. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dutch.
About time Dutch drew something for us.
The original Dutch Mantell, Albert Gardier, he died in 1941, in January of 1941, and wrestling died also in West Texas that went dark for 5 years until Dory Denton came along. And Dory Denton was part of the Denton brothers, 5 wrestling brothers from the West. Dean Denton, Dory Denton, Gene Denton, Glenn Denton, and Reed Denton. Those were the Denton brothers. And
or like the Deucics, man, there are a bunch of them.
The big star of the bunch was Dean Denton. Dean was a world heavyweight champion during the 1930s. He was a world champion in 1937.
That's Dean there, right?
That's him. That's Dean Denton. He's the world heavyweight champion in 1937. Physically impressive, as you can see. Clean cut, marketable, credible to sports fans. Gave the Denton family name national recognition. Unfortunately, after his career was over, Dean Denton owned a bar in Southern California and committed suicide there.
Ooh. Dean Denton was that's the same Dean Denton. He was an NCAA champion, right?
I'm not sure, John.
Is that right, Jerry?
I'm very athletic.
I'm thinking about Dutton.
Yeah, Hutton.
Oh,
Hutton.
Hutton.
I'm thinking about Hutton.
Yeah. Hutton was from Oklahoma.
That's why I forgot about him.
Oh, you know me as NCAA champion.
Dick Hutton.
Dick Hutton. That's right.
He put a $1,000 bill on his chest.
That's right.
Dory Denton is the brother who became more impressive outside the ring than inside the ring, became a promoter He's the one who would bring Amarillo back to life. It had been presented in Amarillo. We covered that in previous episodes during the 20s and 30s with Cal Farley and the original wrestler slash promoter Dutch Mantell, who also opened a training school and trained all these territory owners there in West Texas. And so in 1946, Dory Denton reopened professional wrestling in Amarillo. His first major promotion was held at the Tri-State Fairgrounds, March 14th, 1946, marking the beginning of regular wrestling in the city after 5 years without consistent events. The other brothers, Gene Denton, also worked there. He was a wrestler for Dory Denton in Amarillo, who came in, worked mid-card most of the time. He was a trusted wrestler. They often called on Gene to come in, just was a steady, reliable worker. Glenn Denton maintained the Denton reputation as an athletic family member and wrestled some during the 30s and 40s. And Reed Denton was the youngest of the brothers who had a really short wrestling career, didn't wrestle a whole long time. Denton's influence brought athletic legitimacy. I mean, this is like a very well-known collegiate or amateur or very known star family name opening wrestling back up in Amarillo. I mean, it brought a lot of credibility to it. He wasn't just another promoter trying to create a wrestling market. He was part of a wrestling family that had national connections and a national name. And so he starts building a territory up again out of Amarillo. He starts working with Sled Allen in Lubbock. He finds him a local guy to work in Plainview. He finds a local guy to work in Borger. He finds a local guy to promote and work in Pampa. He expands to Clovis, New Mexico. He works with Pat O'Dowdy, who we mentioned back in the 1930s as a worker. He is opening up and promoting Odessa, Texas. He works with Benny Wilson in Abilene, who had opened a sportatorium building there in the 1930s. And all of these towns became the nucleus of what later would be evolving into the famous Western States Sports Territory in West Texas. They're drawing people like cattle ranchers, farmers, oil field workers, railroad employees, military personnel, small town families, and the thing that really separated Amarillo and West Texas wrestling from the rest of Texas wrestling was junior heavyweights. They had the Southwest Junior Heavyweight Champion, which became the large championship belt there in West Texas. And one of the biggest stars that would ever be in West Texas was attracted to that territory because it was a junior heavyweight territory, and that was Dory Funk Sr., who had broken in Ohio and in Chicago, and then had loaded up his family and brought them down to West Texas because he was a smaller build type wrestler, and he had gotten advice from the wrestlers back in Ohio that he should go to a smaller wrestler type junior heavyweight territory. And they told him there's a guy who's opened up a territory out in West Texas, and that would be perfect for you. And so he went out there. He wrestled under several different names. He didn't wrestle under the Funk name at first. It probably took a year or two for him to eventually standardize and use the name Dory Funk. And he used different towns that he was from for a long time until he finally settled on being from Hammond, Indiana, which was his original hometown.
Now in your notes, he said it was primarily their work for Cal Farley Boys Ranch too, right?
Yeah, he was brought in 1950.
And he wasn't really wanting to get into whether wrestling.
Well, he was decided he was going to take a break from wrestling, and he got offered the job as superintendent. They had a riot at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. The boys had all stormed the gates and taken over the place, and it was a real rough place because all of these boys who had no homes, and they had been juveniles, essentially juvenile delinquents. That's what the Boys Ranch was for. And Dory Funk became the superintendent in 1950. He stayed there for 3 years until 1953. And Terry Funk has often told the story about how when they left the boys' ranch and they were driving, the road was lined up with boys all the way down the road saying goodbye to them. And Terry said, I sat in the back seat and cried that we were leaving the boys' ranch.
Wow.
But there's an interesting mix of things that are going on here at the same time as we get toward the end of the 40s. Of course, in Waterloo, Iowa, there'd been a little meeting in 1948 with 6 promoters who came out of there with the idea and concept of the National Wrestling Alliance. And so that was coming in at the end of the 40s also. Dory Funk coming in to West Texas was an interesting thing. And he would work for Dory Denton in West Texas until 1955. In 1955, Dory Denton sold the territory to Doc Sarpolis, and Doc Sarpolis then would eventually make Dory Sr. a junior partner in 1961 to the West Texas territory.
A junior partner, is that a financial partner then?
Yeah, essentially you couldn't be a wrestler and a promoter, so he cut him in with points on the town on the down low.
So they had the same restriction in Texas as well?
Yeah,
you couldn't be a wrestler and a promoter? Right.
So you always had to have a front man. Always had, and Doc Sarpolis essentially was the front man. He's on every wrestling program there is from 1955 until 1967 when he passed away.
Was that because they treated wrestling like a shoot?
Yeah.
Because that makes
sense. That model was used in Georgia with Paul Jones, being a promoter when
Tennessee.
I was usually we talk about in Tennessee, with Nick Goulas and Roy Welch. It just makes no sense.
Yep. Well, it was a way for the athletic commission to be funded because they collected 5% of the tax.
Yeah. So it makes sense. It makes sense now. You got a bunch of corrupt government officials.
Yeah, and they got licensing fees on everybody. Yeah. And then you got promoters' license, and they had all different kinds of licenses. We'll do a show about that sometime.
Are you telling me the government was actually corrupt back then too?
Oh yes, John. Oh,
no.
Yes. Yeah. I hate to.
Damn it.
I hate to blow that kayfabe, but yeah. They had booker's license, matchmaker's license, referee's license. They actually had a seconds license, which was kind of like a manager's license. But you had to, if you're going to be at ringside in support of a wrestler, you had to have a seconds license. All kinds of licenses.
Wow.
So, I mean, the thing about it here, and I don't want to just.
Mr. Briscoe got along real well with that fish head that ran the Baltimore promotion.
Yeah, he and I were like, we're on each other's Christmas list.
I bet you. Right. Still to this day, I bet.
Still to this day.
That's right.
Without the pioneering efforts of Dory Denton and the steady growth of the promotion throughout the 40s, the legendary Amarillo territory would never have existed. I mean, Dory Denton came in there. He had a vision. And he had a great, credible athletic background and a name and credibility with his family, and he got it up and going. And when he sold it to Sarpolis in 1955, the territory had 18 towns that they ran on a regular basis out of Amarillo.
That's a lot of towns.
Wow.
Dory Denton was the third father of Amarillo wrestling.
I grew up out there. I didn't know there were 18 towns in West.
18, yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, well, when we get
they ain't
there,
easy drives.
No, you can't get there from here.
Those drives in Amarillo territory. That's what really, I think, prohibited a lot of guys from going out there because the drives were just brutal.
Brutal.
Albuquerque is El Paso. I mean, that's just one example.
We've talked about.
Well, I told you, Abilene, they had a sign right there, El Paso, 444 miles. And that ain't a little jaunt.
No. Well, we've talked about how offices, if they did their TV, and TV was just coming in at this time that we're talking about now in the late 40s. If they had TV on Saturday, they typically wanted to have a short trip town on Saturday night. The short trip towns for Amarillo were Hereford and Littlefield, and there was another one.
Gary, my high school, Sweetwater. My high school, Sweetwater, we had 2 high school district games that were over 200 miles. We traveled. So we played basketball on Tuesday night. You'd travel 200 miles each way. You drive 400 miles, play a basketball game, and get back and have to go to school the next morning at 8 a.m. It was
What a
Pecos and Fort Stockton were our two towns that were
Wow.
200,
Wow.
200 plus miles.
Fort Stockton was a regular town for Amarillo.
That is in the middle of nowhere.
Yep, it sure was. They ran it usually once a month. Luthez. Luthez was a amazing. I mean, Luthez had amazing impact on pro wrestling in post World War II. Of course, we know him as the dominant National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Champion. He held the title 6 times, but he established himself as one of the Southwest premier attractions because of his performances in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio, and places like that. Texas had become one of the most competitive wrestling regions in North America by the end of the 40s. In the mid 40s was when Luthez made his, he fit the mold perfectly to make a huge impact there. One of the defining moments of Thesz's early career, May 12th, 1944, he defeated Hans Schnabel in Houston to win the Texas Heavyweight Championship. I think he ended up holding the title like 6 times, but the championship, as we mentioned, had become one of the most prestigious regional titles in professional wrestling. He won it multiple times. His feuds were with Ernie Dusick, Buddy Rogers, Olaf Olson, Dave Levin, and numerous other wrestlers. When Luthez held the Texas Heavyweight Championship, the title gained enormous credibility because he was already regarded as one of wrestling's finest technical performers, and he had had victories over a lot of tremendous, important wrestlers. And promoters throughout Texas frequently advertised Luthez as the champion to beat, making title defenses major attractions. His rivalry, we're going to talk about his main rival here in just a second, but Luthez became one of the leading representatives of scientific wrestling. We talked about that earlier. Babyfaces were known as scientific wrestlers. He relied on holds, counters, mat techniques, conditioning, and ring psychology rather than theatrical performances. Thez had amazing technical ability. We know he was an amazing physical specimen. He had a lot of credibility with fans. He was a consummate professional. The way he carried himself as a champion was immaculate and awesome. And his reputation elevated every wrestling card that he was on. Championship matches were centerpiece attractions throughout Texas, and it strengthened relationships between Texas promoters and promoters in neighboring states. And although Thez is remembered primarily for the NWA World Championship, his Texas years were instrumental in building that legacy. The multiple Texas Heavyweight Championship victories established him as one of the dominant wrestlers in the Southwest during the 1940s.
Why was Thez not in World War II?
He was. He got discharged in 1944.
So he served and got discharged and came right back. And
Yep. Yeah, it was just right after he got discharged. I think we said May in 1944. I think he got discharged in April.
I'm just curious, why, how did it work back then that he didn't serve out the whole war? I mean, I know he served, but why did?
I don't know. I mean, they had guys that would get
They had
discharged.
new guys that came in.
Yeah, new guys that got recruited in and other guys that got discharged. And there could have been a letter written by a promoter to a congressman or I don't know.
No, I'm just curious. I'm not alleging anything. I just wonder why. Because I didn't know how the draft worked. Why maybe new guys coming in would take the place of the older guys that were in theater, and then those guys would get to go home.
I think he went in right away, if I remember right, if my memory's right. I think he went in 1939 into military service and served till 1944. I think he served 2 3-year hitches, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But he was right. He went right out and went right to Texas, won the Texas heavyweight title in 44, held it pretty dominantly through right up until he won the National Wrestling Association title. And I think he won that from Wild Bill Longson.
Well, he did win it from Wild Bill.
Which leads to our next major catalyst, Buddy Rogers, the making of the Nature Boy. in many ways, the Buddy Rogers effect in Texas was the
And
arrival.
he was not Buddy Rogers when he came to Texas, right?
Yes, that's correct. In a lot of
What
ways.
was his name? Herman?
Herman Road.
Herman Road.
Herman Road was his real name. In a lot of ways, the Buddy Rogers effect in Texas was the arrival of modern wrestling. It was the next generation of what wrestling would become. Rogers was much more of a performer and a showman than a Lou Thez or a Ray Gunkel or a Dusick or someone like that. He had gotten
what a change that had to be. What a really, I mean, that's night and day change from those shooter style guys to Buddy was strictly showbiz. I mean, Buddy had some great moves in the ring. Don't get me wrong, but he was showbiz all the way.
It was like going from biplanes to jets.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was that kind of a modern kind of innovation change. And, you know, after World War II, it ended with the dropping of the bombs in Japan. You know, Buddy Rogers was known as the Atomic Blonde and was just this huge electric, a combination of Buddy Rogers and television just set wrestling on fire.
Right.
And Buddy was the huge attraction out of the Best of Texas Wrestling show from Dallas.
I always thought Buddy Rogers and Gorgeous George were kind of the anti-Jim Londos.
Yeah, kind of.
You'd had because every champion that comes along, every guy that breaks the mold is different from the last one.
Right.
You look at Bruno to Hogan and Hogan to Stone Cold. You know, they're very different. And you had Londos, who was this, you know, real kind of button up, you know, guy, this, you know, legit wrestler. Then all of a sudden you have this flamboyance that comes after it. It makes sense that you have somebody that is completely opposite of the last guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
Thez
was more
down there. Andy Graham did the same thing down there, from Jack to Dutchy Rhodes.
Right. That's right. And you have this great old shooter, this good looking guy, buttoned up, you know, legit athlete. Then you have this very flamboyant guy that come out right afterwards. You know, it just makes sense.
And Jack was different from Eddie.
No.
Because Eddie was the main attraction.
That's why I always say you can credit Eddie, because his territory was actually three different phases: the blood gut from the Graham brothers, and Valentine and Graham, to the button up to Jack Brisco era, then back to the flamboyant style.
What were the first brothers?
Graham brothers.
Graham brothers versus Valentine, and then Von Bronners and all that stuff down there.
1945, March 2nd, Buddy Rogers beats Dizzy Davis, who is going to really play a part in this next episode that we're going to do on the Texas Wrestling War. Dizzy Davis was the Texas actually the title was vacant, but it was a final between Buddy Rogers and Dizzy Davis, and Buddy won. Buddy on June 27th of 45 beats Dave Levin. September 7th, he beat Ted Cox. November 23rd, he beat Jim Casey, and May 10th, 1946, Buddy Rogers defeats Lou Thez for a Texas heavyweight title, which sort of kicks off this rivalry between Thez and Rogers that would essentially last their entire lives. And one of these days, when we decide we're going to do the history of St. Louis wrestling, this rivalry between Lou Thez and Buddy Rogers is what's going to shape modern St. Louis wrestling through Sam Muchnick. And Buddy Rogers is on the Muchnick side, and Thez is on the Tom Pax side.
The Tom Pax side.
And
that's completely opposite, because Lou was broke in by Tom Pax, right?
Right. And Muchnick cannot make any headway at all. He cannot draw better. He's in the secondary building. He cannot get a foothold in St. Louis until he brings in the Atomic Blonde, Buddy Rogers. And that really sets Muchnick's promotion on fire. And Pax starts to decline. It's a great story. We'll tell it when we do.
So Thez and Rogers didn't like each other.
No, not at all.
From the get-go.
And what really caused the rift that would last and the rest of their lives, they went to their graves not liking each other, was they were on a road trip between Louisville, Kentucky, and Evansville, Indiana. And Thez's idol was Strangler Lewis. And, of course, Strangler Lewis was his second and assistant during a lot of his NWA championship years. And Strangler Lewis got paid 3% of the house. to be there. Lou got 10% of the house. And so Buddy Rogers was making very snide comments going, that old fat slob Ed Lewis is making more money than we are. They shouldn't give that money to him. They ought to give that to us, not knowing that is Thez's lifelong hero. And that set Thez against Rogers for the rest of their lives.
That's a pretty good gig to get 3% of the house for nothing.
For nothing.
Pretty much going to radio interviews and, doing PR, and Lou Thez is going to be here next week, and here's his opponent and that kind of stuff. He was kind of the old carnival front man going into the town.
That's where the 13% giant comes in, that Jack had his row about, 3% to Sam and 10% to the champion.
That used to be Strangler Lewis's 3%.
Yeah.
So they just once it got in there, they didn't get rid of it.
They just kept the 3%.
It's like any tax that gets passed, John. Criminals. It ain't going away. It's in there for life.
You've been paying it all along. You'll never miss it. You never had it,
But you got these two guys that are like opposite. Thez is the ultimate legitimate wrestler. He's the Strangler Lewis disciple. He's the athletic excellence in scientific wrestling. And then you got the flashy, charismatic, master at manipulating the crowd, prototype of the arrogant superstar heel in Buddy Rogers. It was just a picture-perfect rivalry.
All right, Mr. Historian, who drew more money?
Well, probably Thez, only because of the longevity. Yeah, Buddy ended up getting sick. It had the heart condition, had to give up the WWF title early, after 1962.
And by the way, we will have a scoop on that coming shortly.
That's right. We got the scoop on it coming up. I got it originally from Bruno, and his son verified it the other day on a phone call. He's going to come on and tell us the exact same story.
Oh, good. Well, Buddy
didn't drop the title. The title got taken from Buddy.
Easy way or hard way kind of conversation. Yeah. Buddy was not physically, he didn't wrestle much after 63. He couldn't go anymore. He did have that around 1977. He had a program with Flair in the Carolinas that was a short Battle of the Nature Boys, but he,
how was he in that?
I just remember Flair always saying there's only one diamond in this business, kid, and it's me, Buddy Rogers.
I mean, how was Buddy as far as his work and everything at that point?
I tagged with Buddy in Miami on a couple of occasions down in South Florida because just taking advantage of it. He was begging Eddie to get in the ring with Dusty, and he never would do it. Eddie never would do it, but he kept begging Eddie to get in the ring. So finally, Eddie just started putting him in some 6-men to kind of pacify him and everything. And we hit him as well as we could in on 6-man.
Right. He was way past his prime at that point.
Way past, yeah. The Flair thing came even after that. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, after the Bruno, after the whatever the heart condition was or whatever, he was never the same again.
So head to head during this time, was Buddy drawing as much as anybody in the world?
Oh yeah,
Buddy was really hot. He just
very
was hot for a really long time.
Really hot. And when you think about, he was the catalyst that put Sam Mushnick on the map in St. Louis. I mean, he made that big a difference. When he came in and hit St. Louis television, and you had the two offices, you had the Lou Thez and Tom Pack's office, which was the dominant office, and they're drawing, 16, 17,000 to the keel. And then you have Sam, who's drawing 3,000 and 4,000. And all of a sudden now Sam Mushnick is able to pass them, and that's because of Buddy Rogers. That's the kind of impact he had.
Yeah.
And that's so strange because everybody put Sam and Lou together.
Well, and they did become partners.
Yeah.
Lou essentially gave up the war, and the Mississippi Valley Sports Club, which was the booking office of Thez and Pax, merged. Well, actually, Sam Mushnick ran both of them. He made Sam Mushnick a partner with him, and Sam ran both of them, the St. Louis Wrestling Club and the Mississippi Valley Sports Club, until finally they merged them into one office. But, I mean, Sam was the last man standing. Lou decided just to be a wrestler at that point, not be a booking office or a promoter. And then he dabbled in it. We talked about that. I just did a show on my podcast about the Nashville UWA promotion that he and Buddy Lee tried to do in '76 and run against the Goulas and Welch, and it lasted 4 months.
4 months.
Yeah, it didn't last long. But this battle between Thez and Rogers, the old guard and the new guard, and Lou's still a very young guy, but he's perceived, because of his wrestling style, he's perceived as part of the old guard. And Buddy, because of his flashing style, and the thing that Buddy always did too, that I always thought was kind of smart but interesting, was he had his own guys that he traveled with. He had his own, 4 or 5 guys that wherever he went, his group.
Yeah, but so did Lou. Lou had guys that he'd bring in to protect him too.
But Buddy was definitely perceived as the future, though. He was perceived as, that this is where wrestling is going, which, we got more Gorgeous Georges, we got more Dizzy Davis, we got more of that kind of stuff, especially as television is coming in. And so, if you start comparing people of that time, you got Thez, who was the superior pure wrestler and the defining champion. And you got Wild Bill Longson, who was a heel, but he was a big, burly, brawling type, tough guy. And then you got Danny McShane, who was a shooter and respected technical wrestler. But Buddy, he was a contrast to all of those. But Gory Guerrero, he was a contrast to all of those guys that were the huge stars in Texas at the time. Last thing we'll talk about today is and maybe one of the biggest things to happen at the end of the 40s is television changes everything.
Yeah, television gonna kill the wrestling business.
And during the first half of the 40s, it's a decade that's really split. Like I always say, wrestling changes in the 5s. So after 45, you kind of have the television era. Before 45, you had newspapers, you had radio interviews, you had arena posters, you had word of mouth with fans, you had, traveling stars. And then after 45, when television comes in, 46, you've got television, which impacts the wrestling business because it's bringing wrestlers into people's homes. And we talked about this during the Welch Legacy series. The things that would go on at the Hippodrome in Nashville were things that you wouldn't see unless you went to the show. I mean, they didn't see the Green Shadow doing his heel stuff unless they went to the show. They only heard about it from their friends. Man, you ought to go down to the wrestling. You ought to see this masked guy down there. He hadn't lost in 2 years, and he's throwing, lye soap in people's faces, and people are like, oh man, really? Is that true? Are they really doing that? Well, when television comes in, all that comes into their houses and into their living room. And, it was easy to understand. The personalities were colorful. People could
cheap as hell to produce.
People could identify heroes and villains, and they were loyal. I mean, we talked about it in 1955 when television was at its height with wrestling. There were 18 different wrestling shows on during the week. In different stations at the time, coming out of all these different markets.
Was it Houston or Dallas first?
Dallas had Houston, like a lot of markets, had local television, in their market, but the syndicated show was the Best of Texas Wrestling, which came out of Dallas.
Dallas Sportatorium.
So one other question about Buddy Rogers. Who came first, Buddy Rogers or Gorgeous George?
I think Buddy goes back to the late 30s.
But Buddy was the Nature Boy then?
He became the Nature Boy in the early 40s, I think.
So he was around before, because I always wondered if he had stolen something from Gorgeous George.
I don't think so. And he was
I wonder if Buddy was one of the first bleached blondes.
Right.
Possibly.
But he came up with that on his own, aside from George.
Yeah, he was from a different part of the country. Now,
New Jersey and
the question
California.
is, Dizzy Davis and Gorgeous George both grew up. We talked about this when Mark Hewitt was on the show. They grew up in a suburb of Houston, and supposedly, and you can look up Dizzy Davis on the internet, and you can see him in his garb. Supposedly, George stole most of the gimmick from Dizzy Davis. He kind of had the Gorgeous George gimmick before, and they had grown up having wrestling. Their parents had
George Wagner, who became Gorgeous George. He grew up watching Texas wrestling, basically.
I don't know if they watched it or not, but Mark Hewitt said that their parents owned fruit stands in Houston, and they built little wrestling rings outside there and put on little wrestling shows. The Rats.
They was highly influenced by him.
Yeah, they were called the Rats.
They had rats back then?
That's what they were called. So we got television coming in, and we're going to have.
There's Dizzy Davis, right?
That's him. Yep, that's Dizzy Davis.
I look at that pose. That's even a George pose there.
Yeah.
So they grew up together, Dizzy Davis and
down in Beaumont, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so television is going to reduce the crowds, which that is how the wrestlers get paid, was on the houses. They don't get paid for television, which is going to cause a major, major deal. And on our next episode, Greg Klein is going to be here, who just put out the book, The Texas
Pro Wrestlers
Wrestling
Strike for TV Pay, and our buddy George Klein book.
Yeah,
Pro Wrestlers Strike. They actually went on strike for TV pay. Pro Wrestlers.
Right. And Dory Funk was one of them.
Dory
Funk was one of the wrestlers who was on strike because he was a star in Dallas on Texas Wrestling. And Greg Klein, who was my bring a friend this year to Waterloo, he's got this new book. John wrote the foreword to it, and he's going to be here to tell us about the Texas Wrestling Wars as we start the 1950s on the history of Texas wrestling.
I just started this book, and it's very enlightening. Greg does a great
Hold it up,
job.
Jerry. Hold it up to the camera.
That does a great job on where's it best?
Yeah, you can sit there a little bit.
Pull it back toward you just a bit.
I have that same book here somewhere, but I don't know where it is. I think
it's a good.
I think maybe Briscoe's reading it right now.
I had
very smart.
I had Greg on my panel at Waterloo, and he did a great job with our crowd there explaining, and we had good questions and interaction.
For you Texans, it's got a lot of pictures in it.
So good. And small words?
And small words, yeah.
Oh, good. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Greg also wrote the book on the life of Junkyard Dog. So looking forward to having him here as a special guest.
Who that say gonna beat that dog?
Who that?
There you have it. There is episode 8 of the greatest state country in the history of the world. God bless Texas.
Wow.
Ooh.